The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the Marketing with Purpose series from the Bliss Business Podcast, where we explore how to build marketing systems that feel and not just sell. I'm Steven Sakach, joined by co-host Tullio, Siragusa, and Mike Liwski. Hey, guys.
Hey, Steven. Good to see you again.
Good to be back.
So last episode, we talked about the fractional CMO versus the category architect. But what if you're a smaller business and don't have the funds to cover those types of roles within your company? Well, today's episode explores a role that's gaining momentum in today's evolving market landscape. The Concierge Fractional CMO, where we're going to talk about what it means, how it differs from traditional marketing leadership, and how you can use it to unlock deep, purpose-aligned growth.
Yeah, Steven, so let's really start with the shift that's taking place, right? Because today companies, they want more than just, growth. They really want that growth to be aligned with who they are, right? What they stand for as an organization. Especially we're seeing this from startups as well as companies that are scaling their brands at the moment. And they often, don't necessarily need, or, for one, they can't even support having yet a full-time CMO, because we know those, roles can be very expensive. But what they do need at this point in time is really the wisdom, the empathy, the marketing chops, the clarity for their marketing strategy.
And, exactly. And what I love about this idea for small businesses of a concierge, when you think of a concierge, it's sort of like it's done for you. It's not so much like a traditional fractional CMO who might come in and do something, but there's still a lot of involvement or might be leading a team. It's almost like this idea of just hand it over, right? So that's where the concierge fractional CMO really comes in. It's not just a part-time contract. It's actually high touch, high trust advisor who helps the organization clarify its purpose. That's the key thing. Craft how it's going to position itself in the marketplace, and then operationalize empathy. So across all the marketing channels. So it's a higher level of high touch, like you think of a concierge type service.
Yeah, and I guess the real differentiator is that it's relationship led. So great concierge CMO doesn't just show up with like a rigid playbook. They listen, they tune into the company's heart, and they ask some questions like, who are you really here to serve? Or what story are you trying to tell? And what's the way of making that story felt? So let's kind of look at the role of this through a purpose lens. So let's zoom in on this a little bit. So the concierge CMO is not just kind of chasing shiny tactics. They often meet you where you're at. So they've seen the steps to growth, and they know kind of the logical path, what it might look like for you. And so that's one of the key things they often do, is just helping brands market with some intention, like making sure every strategy serves something deeper than just the revenue goal as well.
Precisely. And so really what they're focusing on is that long-term emotional connection that the brand needs to create. And sometimes brands with their initial customers, they have that kind of a connection. So it's making sure that when the strategy comes in or the company is growing, that they really don't shy away or deviate from that, right? It's not just about the short-term pipeline where we've got to, quickly generate leads in order to meet some, sort of revenue target or, make shareholders and boards content, right? Whether they're really trying to refine the brand voice, right? If they're trying to refine or craft your origin story, or they're even developing sort of that purpose first funnel for your organization, right? They're really trying to bring the soul of the organization to the forefront and make that the main structure.
I'm so glad we're talking about this because, like you said, Stephen, last week we talked about the category architect. That's a very different kind of CMO. They're actually carving out a marketplace. They're creating a marketplace, very different focus than say an execution-driven CMO that's maybe in a more mature company trying to gain traction in the marketplace or expand. This is really about the culture you're going to create both inside and outside of the walls of your company, right? So they have this unique role of building culture. And because when marketing is driven by a clear and resonant purpose, that's the foundation of building that culture. It has a ripple effect inside the business. Employees feel it, sales teams align with it, and even partners and investors can articulate it with a lot of confidence. Now, the big question, which I'm sure we'll answer later on, is can one CMO do all these things? Not likely, but we'll talk about that later. But that's the intent of this concierge, is really elevating the culture of the business, really creating what it stands for and how people will align with it and resonate with it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point talking about the culture. I mean, because really sometimes, especially with those purpose-driven, human-centric brands, you really sometimes need to work from the inside out with your culture, right? Maybe your first goal is to focus on, your people before you're talking about going out and selling and marketing. But so obviously, human-centric brands here would really benefit, especially those in wellness, education, tech for good, or creative spaces where values and identity are part of the product itself. So let's dive in though on what this concierge approach looks like that you mentioned too later.
Absolutely. And then, you said human-centric brands. Of course, we're very biased. We think every brand should be human-centric because unless you're selling to robots, you're humans on the other side of what you're offering, right? So, but let's break it down.
Your brand is human-centric, whether you believe it or not.
Whether you're aligned with it or not, it is a human-centric brand, and that's the key thing. So let's break down what it really means. This idea of the concierge approach, right? So this role isn't really about managing like 20 accounts or scaling a one-size-fits-all tactics. That's more like the execution side, right? But it's really. And it's not also about tracking the latest campaign metrics. It's immersive, so it's intentional. It's low volume, high touch, relationship built around deep integration with the brand's leadership and identity. So it's becomes, this concierge fractional CMO becomes part of the fabric of the leadership team of the company itself. It's not some vendor or consultant just giving ideas. They are intrinsically involved in shaping the company's direction and intention. And so the concierge fractional CMO model is typically reserved for brands sort of in a critical stage, right? It's either early scale or post-product market fit, where it becomes critical to make sure all those investments actually pay off with results, or preparing to grow into new markets. So that's that expansion or crossing the chasm idea. You've had some traction, but now you want to move into different verticals. So there's there's a need for more of that. And then it's often, these are all very often human-centric brands that know that they have a story to tell. And every brand can have a story to tell, but there's some who know it better than others because they maybe stayed true to their intention from day one. They didn't get lost in the shareholder value thing that a lot of brands do, right? So they don't yet have that internal structure or senior level guidance to tell that story consistently. And this is where the concierge fractional CMO really comes in.
And that piece that you mentioned right there, Tullio, that's the real key to this, right? It's not just the what they're going to do, for the organization or with their marketing, but it's really how they're going to do it. The kind of CMO, might, for example, co-create messaging directly with the founder or the CEO, carving the why behind the brand. And that's nice, right? Because then it could be an internal tool that can be used with employees, so everyone's really speaking from the same hymn book. And it's one that gets used externally as well on your website by your sales folks, right, in all of your marketing. They'll as well coach the internal marketing and the product teams how to market with purpose, right? It's not just about the features and the functionality of, say, a particular product or how your service is different, but really what's the purpose behind it. And then they'll as well help to really choose and configure the right marketing stack that's ensuring your alignment with both your purpose and scalability, right? So that you don't over invest in your marketing stack, but also so that you don't underinvest, right? And that it's all cohesive and collective. And here's really the big one for what this type of concierge fractional CMO will do. And that is really helping to bring together the outside team of creatives, the strategists, the developers, other agencies even, curating the right external partners to bring the vision that they've created to life, right? And so maybe you need to level up some of your campaigns, as well as social media. Maybe it's been difficult to even get it off the ground or continue it or even have it properly articulate what your brand is about. Or let's just say even when it comes to showing up on Google, you're just not really there in a cohesive fashion. So all of those things are how they'll start to come in and put the marketing together, probably at some point even bringing in programmatic advertising into the funnel. But obviously that'd be maybe a higher funnel type of activity, but really starting at the core and then making sure that all those other components of marketing are together.
When I think of the concierge approach, I think it's the kind of approach where you get the whole toolbox instead of just using the hammer, all the time, like you had been maybe in the past. As a small business owner, you get the one tool you go to all the time, but you're using the hammer all the time trying to level up your business. But when I think of the concierge part, this is where you're trying to build a huge. You're not trying to build a huge team overnight, but you're really trying to be an orchestrator, right? So that you're finding, you're bringing together the right freelance writers, the design shops, performance marketers, AI, whatever is needed specifically for that business. And you've got kind of that whole team at your fingertips, and you kind of unify those efforts around, in this case, we're talking purpose, around that one purpose, that one clear message. So they don't just throw vendors at a problem. They kind of curate collaborators, like a boutique hotel will curate an experience, or a chef creates a meal, right? Every part of the brand's marketing or presence feels cohesive, even if the execution is coming from different sources.
When you mentioned about it's not just the hammer, I'm reminded of if anyone's ever had the concierge experience with the Black American Express program. If you want to book, let's say, a concert, they're not just going to help you find the concert. They'll book the concert. They'll book the dinner. They'll book the travel to the location. They'll also understand why you're going there, what special occasion is happening. They will create a whole experience around that outcome that you're looking for, versus, okay, here's a couple of venues, go call them and, see you later, right? So, and so the idea here that we're talking about, this is really powerful in those natural inflection points of growth, right? Let's think about it this way. You have a founder-led brand that has gotten some traction, but needs strategic polishing, right? They now need to figure out how to scale it where it's not completely just dependent on that, right? Or scaling a startup that has 5 contractors and they're pulling you in 5 different directions. How do you manage that in a way that doesn't take away from your focus? If you're the CEO of that company, you need to be focused on growth. Maybe you need to be focusing on investor relationships. So you're getting pulled by 5 different vendors. That's not a good use of your time, right? Or it could be a Series A company that has a full stack team, but no emotional narrative. They're very metrics driven, but it's not landing. So there's needs someone who can help elevate how that team is effective in the marketplace. And in many cases, it can help avoid a lot of the trial and errors of hiring and firing people where you think it's the wrong people. Most of the time, it's just you don't have the right messaging, the right infrastructure in place to help those people be successful. So a concierge fractional CMO really steps in with just the right pressure, not to take over, but to create alignment. And this is what builds this connective tissue between strategy, story, systems, and scale, and as well as execution. That's really the way you need to think about it. Someone putting it all, it's the glue that puts it all together so you have a better outcome and you maximize your investments as well.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about AI here. I'm thinking when you're that concierge and CMO in this kind of fractional role, you're expected to do things pretty lean and with limited hours. And I know this is where we think like aiCMO comes to play, right? That's where it becomes this he's got his shirt on if you're watching the video. But that's where this type of AI sort of becomes this force multiplier for you, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does. For sure. And I think, like you said, when you need to scale quickly, this is where aiCMO comes in, right? It's, a rational CMO, for one, can get from strategy to execution pretty quickly, right? But really, they want to do that without sacrificing the depth or missing really on emotional resonance, right? We could get into this point of where let's do things very quickly, just so we can show traction and get things done. But then the really important stuff will fall by the wayside. And so just like being able to have that dedicated, purpose-driven copywriter, strategist, the campaign architect available to you, at 24/7. You can do that with aiCMO. You'll have those because you've infused these ideas of purpose and differentiation and your brand story into it. So you're not starting really from scratch every time. Say, for example, if you're going to ChatGPT and you're creating a new conversation, there's a lot of prompting, there's a lot of teaching, there's a lot of coaching that has to take place, right? Here, if you want a new ad concept, or even if you wanted to create emails or even develop a landing page, you're starting from the right place, right? It's the point that is already one of clarity. It's aligned to your purpose, and so it's just really the best partner you could possibly have when it comes to marketing.
And then if you went back in the day before AI. And you hired a fractional CMO, really, you'd get the output of whatever hours you were investing. Let's say you were limited by the amount of hours and what you could afford. Really, it shouldn't even be called fractional because, a fractional CMO with using like a aiCMO platform, they could accomplish in just 20 hours a week what would take back in the old days someone full-time, possibly even two people full-time. So you get the amplification, the 10x of their output through one single fractional CMO because they can create multiple brand narratives in minutes. I mean, that's not easy work. That could take weeks, sometimes months, depending on the size of your brand. They could do very deep dives into customer journeys. Again, not easy work. That takes a lot of planning and it used to take weeks, if not longer in some cases. And it can generate emotionally intelligent content across platforms while maintaining a consistent message. That's another challenge too, maintaining that consistent message. So if you have a campaign and you need to create social posts, emails, blogs, etc., Google ads all around, this is where having a partner, really the aiCMO platform is a partner to a CMO, to a fractional CMO, because you get the multiplier effect of being able to produce full-time results at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, I think if you're in that fractional role these days, you absolutely have to be leveraging AI and you need to be doing it at a high level just because, it's really something that'll get you to 0 to 60 super fast. I mean, before what could take you a week, I'm just constantly amazed, it just takes me like an hour of time. And if you're dealing with, as fractional, if you're dealing with multiple brands, basically being able to do that with scale and speed with aiCMO, that's where it brings the heart and horsepower basically to what you're doing. So that concierge CMO then can execute everything with the team, the ideal type of team where they know where they're going. So you can get really good efficiencies, I think, in this kind of approach when you bring that all together.
Especially in a startup. If you're in a startup where you're used to working 60, 80 hours a week, you might actually have a bit of a life back, being able to do things in 40 hours, So it depends on each situation, but without that underlying AI platform to help you, you're just wasting a lot of cycles. Of course, you have to have experience. AI is not smart without the input, except for aiCMO. It'll actually make you smart even if you don't know how to input it. That's the difference between that and ChatGPT, is that you don't have to know all the prompts on how to guide it. It's pretty intuitive. So,
yeah. So ideally in that concierge fractional CMO role, you're kind of bringing the strategy, the systems, the soul of everything, and the right people together. And you're helping brands grow, but without losing heart, right? That's ultimately where we want to get to with our purpose focused efforts here.
If your brand has a big mission but needs focused leadership to bring it to market with love and clarity, this might be the model for you, and it's exactly what you might need. So, and we'd be happy to help. We've actually developed this service here at Zero Company.
Yep, I don't know if we've got a page you can post up on there if you're watching on video with us. Yeah, there is aiCMO.io/fractional-CMO. So in our next episode, we're going to talk about the difference between mission, vision, and purpose, because getting those aligned is where real momentum begins. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for listening to the Bliss Business Podcast. Until next time, keep marketing with purpose.